Okay, so today we're going to talk about Robin Hood. I have a copy of Howard Pyle's version, The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. This is in the public domain, and I'll link to Project Gutenberg so that anybody can read that if they want to. And I was just going to give a brief summary of the first story in the book. And then we're going to kind of talk about him as like a trickster figure and Robin Hood as a story about what to do when leadership is illegitimate. Um, so yeah, this takes place in kind of medieval times in England in a specific place in Sherwood Forest and Nottinghamshire. So Robin Hood was a, gay, lusty youth. It's gay in terms of marry.
We're
Uh,
we're 90s kids, man. We can laugh at that.
and and so he's 18 years old. So the sheriff of Nottingham has set up a uh like an archery contest, and Robin Hood's really excited to go to that. He's a very good yeoman archer. Yeoman is like a skilled tradesman kind of worker in sort of independent artisan class in England at that time. And he's interested in going to that contest to kind of show off his skills and to show off for his love, Maid Marian. And it's a beautiful May day. Uh, you know, Housewives are setting out their linens to bleach in the sun. All the birds and bees are out and all that stuff. And he's going past this group of kind of merrymakers with this pie that they're dipping their fingers into and eating, and of course a big frothy big frothy container of ale. And they look at Robin Hood and they start making fun of him. And he kind of, he's getting a little angry, talks back to him, and they're kind of calling him an infant and things like that. And at some point it gets a little heated and he turns on his heel and he starts walking away. One of them though notches his bow. Oh, excuse me. I forgot to mention that Robin Hood, to prove to them that he's a really good archer, he proposes a bet with sort of the loudest of those fellows, and he says he can hit this yonder deer, and he does. He kills it right there, and but the guy won't pay up, and so that's when Robin Hood turns on his heel, and and then the guy like looses an arrow. He strings his bow and he looses an arrow, and he's drunk, so it misses Robin Hood by like 3 inches. But Robin Hood is in a fury now, and he kills the guy with an arrow. And so he runs away. Some of the guys chase after him, but they don't chase too hard because they don't want the same thing to happen to him. And that's the origin story of Robin Hood, why he became an outlaw. He's living in the forest. He's outside of the purview of the law. The sheriff of Nottingham uh, puts out a reward for him, and people are looking for him, but they can't find him. This is kind of a hard time. I think Richard the Lionhearted, the true king, is off fighting in the Crusades. His brother is ruling in his stead. The sheriff of Nottingham has kind of a heavy hand over this whole place, and so a lot of other people, fall afoul of the law, maybe oppressive taxation. And so about 100 guys kind of gather around Robin Hood and they make him their leader. And he's kind of ruling in the outlaw place in the Sherwood Forest. And over time, the people learn to kind of trust them because they don't take from the people. They kind of take from the nobles, the barons, all dukes and whatever. And they also give to the people some of the spoils, some money, and some food. And so the story says the people consider Robin Hood and his band one of them. Um, and so one day, Robin Hood sets out alone on an adventure, looking for adventure. And he tells his men, like, if I blow on my bugle 3 times, I'm in danger. Like, come and help me. Otherwise, let me go. So he goes on his merry way. He sees many types of people. uh, the story says buxom vixens, something like that, and they in shady areas, and they nod to each other politely. And he goes on, and gallant knights in shining armor and their crimson-colored pages, and fat, friars, and all this cast of characters, but no adventure. So then he comes to a large river, and there's just this kind of log bridge going over it, and he notices on the other guy, excuse me, on the other side, another guy kind of in the same position as him, and and they both kind of rush forward, like wanting to get to the bridge first and cross first, and so they start taunting each other back and forth. Are you man enough? Are you man enough? And they decide. So it's fighting words. And then Robin Hood, challenges him to, he says he's going to hurt him with his arrow or something like that. But the other guy, who's very, very big, says he doesn't have that. And like, so that would be unfair. And he'd be a coward for doing that. And Robin Hood says he's never been called a coward in his life. And then, so they decide to fight the way the guy fights, which is with a quarterstaff, which is about a 6 foot long, sturdy piece of wood, which is sort of like, I think, the common folk weapon of choice, as opposed to the little bit higher in the social hierarchy, the yeoman's arrow. So Robin Hood goes and he cuts himself an oaken, or I think maybe yew or oaken,
I think it's
kind
oak.
of.
Yeah.
It's yew?
I
Okay.
think it's oak. I think it's oak.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
oak, yeah, because
Yeah.
the bow is made of yew.
That's it.
Uh,
Yeah.
oh, good memory.
I
uh,
just read it this morning.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he cuts himself a staff, and they go and fight on this bridge, trying to knock each other off. They fight for a good hour. There's breaks and everything. Eventually, Little John is able to knock Robin Hood off, and Robin Hood is in the river. He's soaked, but he laughs at the situation. It's a pretty fun, he's soaked from head to toe. This was a good fight. He's laughing. So he goes to the other side, and they kind of meet up. They kind of, they're kind of reconciled to their differences. They got it out. And I think Robin Hood, he blows on his bugle, or his men come anyway, and Robin Hood and Little John tell him what happened, and they say, well, you can't really be doing that to our leader. So then they beat him up, and but he gives them just as good as he got, and they all come to kind of respect each other. And Robin Hood invites him into the group, and to be part of the men who wear the Lincoln green costume. And he tells him, the terms. You'll get 3 costumes a year, and you'll get paid a certain amount of money every so often. And this is kind of what we do, and this kind of what it is. Little John kind of agrees, and then so they go deep into the woods, and they set up their they make little shelters and little couches, and they're kind of drinking ale, being merry, and uh and yeah, and so they basically christen Little John with his current name, Little John, which they all remark at how funny it is, because he's 7 feet tall and the biggest, broadest, baddest guy anybody has ever seen around there. And he's from somewhere else. Um, yeah. And yeah, so he become, since he's able to beat Robin Hood, I guess he becomes Robin Hood's right-hand man. So that's just a very rough kind of summary of kind of what happens in the first story where Little John joins their group. But do you want to you had listened to a podcast, and I'll try to listen to it later about the trickster figure, and did you want to talk about Robin Hood as a trickster figure or the trickster figure in general?
Yeah, I think because you had referenced the Jonathan is it Paju? Pajau?
I think Pajot, I don't know. Yeah, it's
Peugeot, that
French.
makes more sense. Yeah.
He's Canadian.
Cool. The Jonathan Paju, whatever.
Hmm.
You reference a podcast with him where he's talking about Robin Hood and
Mm,
Robin Hood as um an attempt to come up with an honorable way of dealing with an illegitimate leader.
mm,
In the podcast I listen to, which is by Josh Schrei, it's called Emerald. Um, it's a recent episode on tricksters. He talks about Trickster as a figure, and he the podcast is great. He goes through all these different cultures, but a lot of the focus is on, I think, the Zuni or the Hopi people in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and how in their religious celebrations or their sort of big spiritual celebrations for the tribe, they'll have figures who are tricksters. They're clowns or dancers or something,
mm,
and they'll come through. They'll walk in. They'll walk everywhere backwards. They'll break into like sacred spaces and like make fart jokes. They'll sing loudly. One of the stories he said was like one of the examples he gave was, if you're out there and there's the clown is over there singing and you go, "Oh, Mr. Clown, you're singing quite well today." The clown could say, "Yeah, it's because I fucked your wife last night." It's like that kind of like dirty play, kind of just the tearing down of social norms.
yeah.
And the point he makes in the podcast is that when you have, whether it's a leader or a social structure, if there's not a way built in to the structure or the leadership role where the structure is able to die and be reborn, or is able to be critiqued and change direction, if it just doesn't, if there's no feedback loop, then that's where trickster energy will come in to tear it down. And if the society, like oftentimes the society will have like a chance to turn around. And then if they say no, then they'll maybe get another chance, but the stakes will be a little higher. And if they say no, then things go up further and further. And
Mm,
if it gets to a certain point where like each of those is a chance to turn to Trickster and say, yes, we're going to feed you, we're going to take care of you.
mm,
Um, you're here to tell us that there's problems and we are going to address those problems. We're going to, make a change in how we're doing things.
mm,
If you don't do that, then the trickster energy kind of builds up and it will eventually just tear down the whole system, because the system has to go away for the new thing to be born. If you're not willing to go through the effort of birthing it yourself, then trickster will come in and tear it down. Um, and I had just listened to that when you sent me this Robin Hood podcast. And so it occurred to me that what you have in Robin Hood is a case of the legitimate rulership is gone. So the person who is in charge is not to be trusted. Prince John, the sheriff of Nottingham as his right man, but Prince John.
mm,
Um, and you have Robin Hood coming in as a way of um trying to address the balance, the imbalance. I mean, I think even in the reading that you did, that's the book that you're reading from, they say there's something in there about like his merry men were all people that had been like screwed over by abbots or falsely accused by a lord, or like, so there's all these examples of a social system gone wrong. And even in that story, when he's first coming into town, the thing that makes him an outlaw, killing one of the king's deer, is his first like
right.
social
Yeah.
sin, right? That group of men, if I remember correctly, they're foresters. They work for the
Yeah.
king.
That's
And
right. I
so
didn't
they're
say that.
they're supposed to tell him that. So if he goes in and he's like, if you're like the king's foresters and you're in charge of like making sure nobody kills the king's deer or whatever. And some youth comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill that deer over there to show you what a good archer I am." That's the point where a legitimate ruler says, a legitimate social structure says, "No, if you kill that deer, you'll be an outlaw." Oh, okay. Well, I'm not trying to do that. I'm all fired up. Let's shoot at a tree instead, No problem, no outlaw, nothing. Nobody says anything to him. He kills the deer, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Well, we're foresters,
Yeah.
and so now you're in trouble, buddy."
Yeah.
And I mean, that's completely illegitimate. That's,
Yeah.
I don't think I have to explain why that's bad. So that's like your first sign that something is rotten, you know? And well, then I can go more into that later, but like there's more to be said about what happens after that. But just to make the link with the trickster, one of the things that they talk about in the Emerald podcast is Trickster's job is to Trickster's job is to remind us that everyone has a belly. Even if
Mm.
you have these high, noble-minded ideals that are actually noble and you're doing your best to achieve them, if you aren't paying attention to the fact that everybody's hungry and somebody at any moment could come through and like, in the trickster ceremonies, they've got whips and they run around with whips and they'll just hit you with whips if you're not paying attention. If you're paying attention, then you dodge them, and everything's fine. But it just kind of keeps you on your toes. It reminds you that there are elements that need care and feeding that maybe aren't high and mighty. And if you don't take care of that whole structure, then the lower elements will tear down the higher elements.
Mm.
Um, and that the trickster elements are usually something that's on the outskirts of society. So
Mm.
Robin Hood becoming an outlaw, very clear he has to go to where all of the criminals are,
Mm.
um, to even maintain the structure, which actually is kind of alchemical. The going down
Mm.
into the
Mm.
dark or into the unacceptable and accepting it,
Mm.
whether you're talking psychology or the actual chemical process of cooking the base matter,
Mm.
the shit in the tube.
Mm.
Um, that you see him kind of go and do that. Um, and what he does to sustain the social structure under the illegitimate rule until the rightful king comes back
Mm.
is he feeds the poor. He
Mm.
he enacts the ritual. He enacts the right of someone is hungry. And if you won't take care of them, then we will find a way to do that. And
Mm.
so he's ultimately serving the king. He's not doing it for personal profit. He's doing it to
Mm.
support the people who are suffering. He's taking it, rob from the rich, give to the poor is such a cliched Robin Hood phrase, but it is the action of a trickster figure of its action of someone who is trying to feed Trickster so Trickster doesn't tear things apart.
Mm.
So that's what I would say. That was sort of my main, like, oh, so cool to be hearing this from Pajot and having just listened to the Emerald and kind of having them interweave so well.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds really good. That was a important detail I didn't mention that yeah, the guys he encountered were foresters. And yes, so they're supposed to be taking care of things and yet they're just feeding their faces and getting drunk. And not only did they not warn him like it's against the law to kill that deer, the whole reason he killed the deer is because they had goaded him into it. They had brought their personal kind of just wanting to mess with someone into it. In our language, as unprofessional as you can be.
Mhm.
And then yeah, they paid for it, and then I mean he was in a way defending himself, and then yeah, he becomes an outlaw. I would and you mentioned yes, he fed the people when they weren't being fed by the ruler, the illegitimate ruler, the real ruler's gone. And he also serves a kind of justice too, because the whole society itself is unjust. There seems to be a lot of preying of the powerful on the weak. And so he's turning the tables on the powerful when he can, and like you said, not for his personal profit, but to help others. And he is yeah a reflection of what the true ruler should be.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And you had also mentioned something about the trickster figure. Oh yes. It it there has to be a feedback loop in any type of system, right? Like a society or an individual human of the low to the high. And yeah, I had uh thought of how when he encounters Little John, who has the same name as the illegitimate ruler, right?
Yes.
Which is
Yes,
kind
I
of
think that
funny.
is super important. But we can go into that later. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
But and also his name is ironic because he's huge. And that's
Hmm.
sort of made there's just this they can play with words, they can be playful kind of thing. They don't need to stand on these titles like these people they're stealing from who are oppressing the poor do. But yeah, so he loses to John's Little John's, so it shows he doesn't need to be the top dog all the time. You can imagine like a dictator of like a oppressive regime kind of like I think in North Korea they say like the leader um like he played the first time he played golf he played a perfect game. There's these stories that like the regime puts out. It's just like there's obviously something really wrong going on here. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm assuming that didn't actually happen. I mean, maybe he's not really human and he's a god and he does all this stuff. I can't technically one with 100% certainty know that, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say he doesn't do these kinds of he's not a perfect god-like figure. Um, but yeah, Robin Hood can lose to somebody and then he laughs about it. And of course there's a baptism kind of thing there too, where he's knocked off the log by Little John and he's immersed in water. And so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Pajot mentions that a comparison between that and several other myths and biblical stories as well of confrontations by the water and baptism and then at the end we have the sort of backwards baptism by ale of Little
Yeah.
John, which I think is just a wonderful that is such a trickster element because you have tricksters will take sacred ceremonies and profane them purposefully. They
Yeah.
do the profane version of the ceremony, and here you have a baptism with beer, with just the thing you get drunk on, the thing you have. It's not a holy, sacred the water and the oil and all that. It's just like we're gonna hold you down and dump beer on you. Now you're baptized.
Yeah.
Ah, you know. And that's total trickster energy. They're taking that apart, but they're also still utilizing the core of it of like he is reborn, he has a new name.
Yeah, it is important. Yeah, they're taking it very lightly, but yeah, it is a christening. He is really being welcomed into the group, and their group is important.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I also really liked that, and you pointed to this. You were saying that like Robin Hood's able to lose, right? But if you look at it, he doesn't do that in the first one, right? Like in the first part of the story,
With the
he gets
foresters.
with the foresters, he gets really
Yeah,
hot-headed. He won't let
yeah,
them insult him.
yeah,
He has to prove himself. And then when he's attacked, he has to strike back stronger and he has to kill the person.
yeah,
Whereas with Little John, there's a sense that already in that first chapter, he's learned some humility. He's learned how to not have to defend his own ego. He's able to, oh, hey, I lost. This is fun. I was on an adventure. Like I don't have to get mad at you for beating me. I don't have to be right and strong all the time. So there's this element of like, oh, look, he's grown up already. Um
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And he is yeah, and at that point he's a leader already, and so you might say there's even some people would feel there's even more pressure to act like the top dog at all times. But maybe he knows how to be a real leader.
Yeah, and in fact, that brings us right back to why I was so excited when you mentioned the Prince John, Little John
Oh yeah.
thing. Because, and I think Peugeot says this as well, that the comparison, like Robin Hood is not looking to be king. He's not looking to replace the rightful ruler. He's not looking to be that sort of revolutionary rebel that tries to overturn the social structure, and then we end up with the same or worse afterwards, you
Yeah.
know? And for me, that weird mirroring of the two names, like you have this leader of the people, right? And he's off for adventure. He's off to kind of prove himself. And he goes through town and there's no adventure, whatever, whatever, and he gets to this liminal space by the river, which, if you listen to the full Robin Hood podcast, the river is a symbol of some sort. Like Peugeot kind of unpacks it a little bit. I'm not going to do all that again,
Hmm.
but like that's a space. That's a archetypal space
Hmm.
of confronting the monster, the giant by the river. And he gets there, and it's Little John. And I'm just and my mind immediately was like, oh, it's maybe not immediately, but I was thinking like, oh, this is the version, the voice in Robin Hood of I could be king. The the
Oh
the
right.
illegitimate ruler, Prince John, the little version of Prince John that's inside Robin Hood is confronting him. And he has to show up and battle him well, but he loses. And I think that's the thing that prepares him to actually be a leader, is he knows that the the part of him that wants to be Prince John is stronger than him. And that he has to like how do I put this? Like because he's still John is his right hand man, so he's still subordinate to the sort of principal part of the personality that Robin Hood represents. But we all know that if it came down to it, like John could beat Robin Hood. So the idea being that if Robin Hood came through and actually beat John and won and went on, then that part of his psyche might take over. But because he has this experience of recognizing, oh man, like if we take the story as a metaphor, it could be Robin went into the woods and, thought and prayed about what he was going to do. And he realized, wow, I have this pride in me. I have this desire to be king. And I can't, it would overpower me. I recognize that if I gave into it, I would not be able to be strong enough to be the good leader. I would be corrupted if I were to step into that power. So let me keep this desire for power next to me, but subordinate, so that I always have an eye on it and my other men can come and grab it and hold it down if we need to. And and once that power dynamic is settled, then they baptize him, and then he's brought in as the little John, the part of their band that is the little version of the king. And I just like I'd never heard that before. I don't know. I just thought it was neat to have that so many different like points ping when you line them up that way.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's terrific. Yeah, so he is the little version of the king. Like it's not so much that it's just funny because he's big physically, but he is, yeah, the little version of the person that the part of Robin Hood that wants to be king.
Mhm.
One thing I don't so but why does he need to lose to Little John? Is it like he therefore sees how powerful that part of his soul is, and he will be wary of it. He will be careful. It'll be by his right side, and he will control it politically. But if he had beaten it's the idea that it would be a suppressed part of his soul, and so therefore it could uh, erupt back up if he did gain political power. And why does he need to lose to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make the same case for Little John representing this part of, the ideal rebel leader if he had won.
Mm,
But I think, and Peugeot kind of points to this too. There's an element of like humility, or
mm,
it's a mirroring of like Christ on the cross, right?
mm. Yeah,
And I know I know,
being beaten very badly, struggling, being
yeah,
hurt.
and acknowledging that, like, if you look at the story of Christ, Jesus is God. Christ is God as a human in human form. There's not a difference there. God comes to earth and can't beat the political structure, tries to help people, gets rejected by them, is totally innocent, and is hung on a cross, one of the most painful ways you could possibly die. Like, that's not a triumphant story. God doesn't conquer the earth by conquering the earth, you know? God conquers the earth by submitting to the entirety of the process. And if we look at Robin Hood, what I see there is, like, if he had triumphed over Little John, he may have, like, he may have believed he was impervious to corruption. He may not have valued the danger that trying to become king himself, or trying to overthrow the political structure and replace it with himself and his own structure. He wouldn't have seen the danger of it. And by losing, it's like, oh, I have to rise to my level and wait for the true king to come back. I'm not trying to become the true king. And if he had beaten John, it may have implied, mythologically speaking, poetically speaking, oh, he is able to beat that false identity, and he's able to become the true king. He's able to, like, represent that role. And
Hmm.
that's not the story we're telling. We're telling the
Mm,
story of the person that goes into the dark, into the low, and amongst the outlaws at the edge of the, in the woods, in the green
hmm.
woods. And he helps facilitate the social order until the true king comes in. And I just think that, on a really esoteric level, there's an element of, like, when we're doing meditation or personal work, the ego with which we do the work is never going to become God. Like, that what, or enlightened, enlightenment is sort of the falling away of the ego.
Mm.
Not that I think the guy writing Robin Hood had all of these ideas, but
Yeah,
stories have patterns in them for a reason, right? And I
yeah,
think I think the pattern is pointing to that there's a humility, and then when the rightful king returns, everything is made right, and Robin Hood gets to be a nobility again. He gets his lands and titles restored. He gets to marry Maid Marian, and they kind of have the whole happily ever after thing. But he doesn't achieve it himself. He achieves it on behalf of the true king,
yeah,
and that's mirroring, like, the Grail myth of the Fisher King versus the Grail King. Um, it's just, if you keep trying to become that force instead of just maintaining what is there in the hopes that something good will come in, um, you run the risk of perpetuating the cycle of illegitimate leadership. Um, the
yeah,
thing I struggle with is, in what do we do about, like, that doesn't work so much on a physical plane, because, like, who do we recognize as a legit, if we recognize a current boss or a current whatever, some social structure that we're a part of, as an illegitimate leader, like, how do we find a good one? Like, because there could be, like, oh, well, maybe you should be the boss, and I think that's a valid path. But when it comes to that internal work, I don't think that's true. I don't think the ego ever gets enlightened. I think it's something greater comes in and sort of pushes that aside and puts everything in its right place. So,
yeah. That sounds really good. I would say on the political level, you ask the question, what if the leadership is really terrible, is really wrong and illegitimate? The real leader, there isn't. This story isn't about that, but yeah, maybe Richard the Lionhearted in this story comes back, and he's even worse than his brother John. Yeah, I don't think this story talks about that, but I would say, though, it does talk about maybe the precursors to any political solution, which would be different in how it depends on the culture and the time and how the political solution would play out. But I think this and many spiritual leaders who do not want to become political leaders, Buddha, Jesus, etc., um, the prophets of the Hebrew scriptures,
Hmm.
and of course that is all about how God keeps telling them, you know, how He'll sort of be their leader and speak through the prophets, but they still want a king, you know. But
Nice. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, it's like without having moral leadership, like any political solution you come up with is likely to be wrong. Because your head is not in the right place. You know, if you don't have the right morality, the right virtues and everything, it's unlikely that, excuse me, out of that body politic will emerge a good person or leader or system, you know, if you don't have a good morality. So I would say this does address it in that way. And you comparing Robin Hood to Christ is, yeah, does see show that he is a moral leader. So he's a leader of the band of outlaws, and but he's also a moral leader. And as I mentioned, as you mentioned, he takes care of people on a basic level. And you know, they love him not just because he provides for them, but because he is a loving force. He cares about them. And also, yes, he does provide a hand of or a fist of justice too, to corrupt officials.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know all of the Robin Hood stories, the actual mythology, but the way the mythology has touched my life is like Robin Hood is always like he doesn't kill people.
Mm.
Like he's always like, oh, he'll tie him up or he'll like do so, he has that um gesture kind of a vibe. Like, oh well, we're just gonna do this and leaves them all tied to the tree in their underwear or whatever and runs off with the money,
Yeah.
but he's never like purposefully killing and destroying and it's just a hey, you don't need this, these people need this, we're just gonna make that happen. Like
And
there's
he
that
is punished.
morality.
Mm. And he is punishing them, shaming them and everything, but yeah, not taking their life. They have a they have an opportunity to change, to grow from that experience. He's
Hmm.
also, so Batman is like Robin Hood then, right? From the
Yeah.
shadows, someone who was forced into outlawry and who brings justice and who doesn't kill people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like you could say Batman's like an evolved Robin Hood because Robin Hood loses his nobility and Batman still gets to be Bruce Wayne. Like he's managed to hold that tension between the two a little more strongly. But every time he's Batman, he goes down into the Batcave. He goes down the same way Robin Hood goes down into the Greenwood to meet with the Merry Men. Like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Isn't Wayne Manor also on the sort of on the outskirts of town? He's sort of, you know, he's sort of a recluse. I don't know. There's many different versions. So,
I think it's usually represented that way, and I think the reason, if it is usually represented that way, I'm not a huge Batman fan in that I don't have all that data in my head.
yeah.
But if it is represented that way, it would make sense because if he is holding that figure of the sort of watcher on the periphery, the one that comes in and makes the changes that need to happen, regardless of what the social order says is possible, but does so in a way that isn't just violent and destructive, then yeah, we're looking at the same archetype.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems like Batman lives in a time where it's kind of lawless, right? There's the rule of law is not strong. It maybe in the Christopher Nolan movies, there's like a lot of corruption among the police and everything. I would, you mentioned how in many of the stories, Robin Hood was like a nobleman, and after the king comes back, he has his lands restored and all that stuff. According to Wikipedia, in the earliest stories we have, he is like a yeoman, though. So he is not like he is a commoner, but like
Oh.
a higher level commoner. I think they probably could own land, but I think that that develop as the story developed over time, they raised him up in status. But I think he was like a yeoman in the earlier stories. So he was a skilled artisan, so like a skilled working class in our language, but not like upper middle class or lower upper class or whatever. Like he
Mhm.
sort of he wasn't like a landowner or yeah, a bit he wasn't as high in the earlier
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. That's interesting. I want because like I'd have to check the Wikipedia page, but I wonder like who's telling the story? Like what's the audience in the earlier stages versus the later stages? Because if it is a story told to and by that level of society, it would make sense to, sort of have the hero come from that because that's the story you're trying to tell is when you are in this position of middle class, of skilled tradesman, blue collar worker, whatever you want to, call it nowadays. If you're in that class and you feel like the rulership is illegitimate, like how do you what metaphorical tools do you need to realize, like, to be moved to help the people that need help, to maintain what should be a healthy social structure until something rightful comes in, as opposed to trying to just overthrow the whole thing? Because then you're not from the Emerald podcast, you're not feeding the trickster anymore. You're not feeding that energy of everybody needs to eat. You're just destroying things so that something new can be born. And
Mm.
that may or may not, when it's trickster energy, usually it is the birth of something new is good. But when it's power over and trying to just, they're not doing it right, I could do it right, I'm going to try and do it right, then you have that kind of cyclical repetition that we see, with like um the communist revolution. I think is a pretty good example of Stalin. I'm sure had good intentions at some point, maybe, but clearly they didn't last very long if he did.
Yeah, in terms of I was thinking in terms of the most illegitimate, most top down, not listening to feedback. I was thinking of the totalitarian regimes, both fascist and communist. Like, I don't think they listened to the bottom at all. I think they were all about, here is our vision. It is up to you to enact the vision, including of the dear leader, the Führer, whatever. And anybody in the way, we will justify however many millions of deaths. And even the people who were 99% supporting the dear leader, they weren't supporting them 110%. Gotta go.
Hmm.
Yeah. I remember there's a chilling quote from I think I can't name him, I'm sorry, but I don't remember his name. He was a British Marxist historian. And I believe this was in like after all the crimes were very, very well known of communism. And they said something like, if it took, on his deathbed, they asked him if it took 100 million more deaths, and then you did achieve true communism, true
Hmm.
heaven on earth utopia. Would it be worth it? And he said it would.
Hmm.
I mean, to me, that is a twisted way of looking at things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can see his point, but that's never that's never how it goes. It does, like, if you knew 100% for sure that, oh no, I can't even say that. Because you, like, the next part of that sentence is, if 100,000 people died, then heaven on earth would happen. Like, that's not even the right question to ask. The question is like,
Yeah,
why do 100,000 people have to die?
yeah,
Are we just sacrificing people to the gods? That doesn't sound like communism, you know? Why can't you enact communism without killing these 100,000 people? Can we look at that? Like that's where the question, that's where the actual solution might come from.
yeah,
But like you should never have to kill 100,000 people, and so therefore, if you're a good leader, you should never be willing to do that.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think it's, we can think of many different ways, but I think it's partially their systems are utopian. So
Hmm.
it's not tied to nature at all. Like I think any good system is tied to nature, like you're talking about with and system is more loose a word here, being used more loosely here. It's not like a machine. Exactly.
Hmm.
And yeah, a system that listens to feedback and adapts to the times. That's sort of more with human nature, with nature. And of course, I'm sure that communism, Marxism, and Nazism was a little bit different, but Marxism had this idea they were going there. There's this blank. It's kind of a blank slate theory of human nature. If you educate people in the exact right way, they will become the true communist. And, they're not going to have all the crazy stuff that human beings tend to have and tend to want and their desire for power and to be better than others and all that stuff. It's
Hmm.
like it's a perfect system down to the core of the human being and up to like the level of international government.
Wow. Yeah,
And
and I
so,
was,
yeah, that's
well,
yeah,
go ahead.
it kill 100 million more people. I mean that's the right system, right? Because you won't have bourgeois people living meaningless lives.
Yeah, I mean it's so that that perspective is so just seems so ignorant to me of human behavior. Like social structures form themselves. You can't you it's not and people behave. I mean, there's a Stanford prison experiment, which granted, I guess the Marxists didn't have access to that at the time, but when you put a person in a role, they will enact that role. Um, and it's a much harder thing to build a communist society where there are not roles for people to fall into that breed corruption because people want corruption. And on top of that, like you're talking about utopias, like utopias don't feed Trickster. They want everything to be perfect. And
Yeah,
when you don't attend to the fact that there is an element of the world that is imperfect and dangerous and
yeah,
violent and vicious, if you don't at least attend to and acknowledge that that's the case, then your system is going to have to be torn down by it at some point. And with communism, with Stalin, like, maybe you could say Lenin was the one trying to build the thing, and Stalin came through and like really just enacted the trickster energy and tore the whole thing down because he was clearly more interested in power than he was in actually trying to help people's lives, or he wouldn't have killed 100 million thousand, people, Ukrainians, all that stuff. So it's just, it's like, I have this theory about evil that, let me make sure I get this right, that there's like, there's two kinds of pain in the world. And one of it is like natural pain, which is like bad shit happens. Somebody gets hit by a car, no bad intention. Go back in time, a plague wipes out your village. Very bad. You could learn from it. Maybe don't shit where you eat. There's stages and things, but there's no there's no intentional harm done. And I think the only place we get intentional harm is from humans. And I think for the most part, it's humans. Well, I think it's entirely, but I could be wrong. It's humans who are trying to avoid that natural pain. They're trying to avoid dealing with something that's just unfortunate, some trickster things. They got knocked over by somebody treated them bad, or worse, it can get very bad. But like it wasn't intentional. But then to try and suppress that, or try and avoid that, or try and avoid feeling vulnerable, trying to avoid feeling weak, because those feelings threaten you, although they're a natural part of being human, that can cause projection onto other people as the cause of those feelings. Then you attack those people because you think they're the ones that are making you feel this way. And if they would just die and they would go away, then I would feel whole and good and true again. But the thing that you're attacking is actually inside of you. You're just thinking it's on them, because then you can blame them for something that's in you. And that's, I think, evil. That's where all evil comes from. I mean, that's Nazis and the Holocaust for sure. Like, Germany is suffering because it lost World War One, got dealt very unfavorable terms. The whole society is having a really hard time. Germany never really had a lot of colonies. It was trying to get these, this was like right after the colonial era. So all these superpowers in Europe, and Germany's like, no, we want ours too, and they lose. Everybody's really just a national blow to
Hmm.
that national
Hmm.
ego. And all of a sudden, they don't have to feel bad about that. It's the Jews' fault. Let's kill the
Hmm.
Jews, and then we are our or the foreigners, or the weak people, the gay people, the mentally handicapped people.
Hmm.
If we just kill all of them, then our greatness will come back, and
Hmm.
we won't have to deal with the vulnerability of having lost World War One. We won't have to deal
Hmm.
with how shittily everybody has treated all the other countries have treated us and taken from us, and
Hmm.
the unbelievable terms that we have to deal with. That behavior towards Germany after World War One did not recognize the Germans needed to eat, and Trickster showed up and ruined Europe.
Hmm.
And that's one way to look at what Hitler was. Hitler didn't have a lot of playful trickster energy, but it was very destructive,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it all got projected onto the Jewish people, who, didn't really have much to do with it, as far as like
There's
all
a
of the
long
Jews are
tradition, though, of
conspiring to, tear
yeah,
down Germany. They're just doing their thing there.
yeah. Well, there's a built-in long history of blaming them already. So there's already kind of a structure and a hit and something to go to for
Yeah, that
that.
karma's kind of already there. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So you think it's the evil, it's sort of like from wrong opinions, or wrong beliefs and things like that that will take advantage of the energy from a deficit, kind of like a hurt place, a need, or something like that.
I think so. I mean, I'm sure with any kind of philosophical theory like this, or psychological theory, it's hard to make a blanket statement that doesn't have holes to pick it apart in. So
Hmm.
I don't mean to imply that this is like the whole thing, but I think a large part of where evil comes from is, I'll say a large part of where we sin even comes from, like, not realizing what is actually being asked of us in the moment. Like, there's some experience that we are saying no to, some mark that we would have to hit and experience, and just sort of trust that we can handle this, or this is maybe not for a reason, but this is what it is. This is what's happening.
Mm.
And we can say yes to that, or we can say no to that. That's kind of our free will as humans.
Mm.
But when we say no to something that's present, and especially something that keeps coming back and keeps coming back,
Mm.
that builds this. It's the feedback loops you were talking about. We're blocking that particular feedback loop, whatever
Mm.
that is, that's trying to be communicated to us, even
Yeah.
if it's like, my partner died and I'm grief stricken. Like, the feedback loop there is, what is grief? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to lose love? What's the lesson of grief? What is it here to impart? In what experience is it meant to impress into my soul as I'm
Mm.
growing? It's
Yeah.
very difficult, and I understand. And I
Mm.
think I would even go so far as to say I think God probably builds that in, and the fact that we're able to distance ourselves from our pain is a gift from God. But that starts creating danger. And the more we try to wipe that off the map, the pain or the suffering, and we refuse to, like, slowly begin to take its lesson in what it's trying to tell us, the stronger we have to get to push it away, the more pain we carry. And then the more we enact that pain on other people, the more we see the world as unfair, we see the world as dangerous, see
Mhm.
the world as just a reason to be angry and resentful all the time. And then we're built up with this negative charge of energy, and we have to dump that on somebody because we can't, if we were to hold it on ourselves long enough, we would have to face the fact that we are generating it by refusing our own experience.
Mm. Yeah, I've
So,
heard someone say, I can't remember what they said, but they were saying something like, don't become true friends with anyone or marry something like that who has not gone through grief because there's just a part of themselves they just don't know. There's a part of life that they don't know. And so that's pointing to the usefulness of grief.
mhm,
Getting back
mhm,
to the evil thing, yeah, I would agree that it's maybe the most, the majority or, the vast majority of cases of people doing wrong is from, yeah, a deficit, something that they lack that they need to mature into, and something about the situation that's causing them pain that they don't understand and they don't know what's called for in the situation in terms of growth and change and adaptability and everything. And that's why they're lashing out violence, etc., in the majority of cases. But I also think there is some natural human aggression, desire to be better than others, a psychopathy that maybe enjoys the pain of others, and things like that. I do think there's that in human nature that is also sometimes called by these wrong opinions and these, unenlightened kind of things that people just use as an excuse or a reason to like kind of do what they want to do.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there you go. There's one of the holes in the theory that I was like, there's got to be some in there somewhere. Yeah, and I think you're right. Like there are psychopaths, there are sociopaths, there are those things that if you want to zoom out far enough, maybe it's a case of generations of repression culminating in someone who has something in them so suppressed they can't even, be human to that degree. They lose their
Mm.
empathy. But that's not even a helpful perspective because then what do you do? You're like, oh well, it's their ancestral trauma. No, they're still a serial killer. Like you can't if you're going to acknowledge that it took 4 or 5 or 6 generations to distill down into this psychopathy, like how are you gonna handle 4 or 5 or 6 generations of healing? Like
Yeah.
I don't know how we don't have the skills to do that. And I don't know if there are skills to do that. I'm thinking of like a very enlightened society, which is again very utopian. And in the meantime, we can't just let them run around and kill people because we're like, oh, well, we
Yeah,
understand where their pain is
exactly.
coming from. There
Yeah.
are monsters in the world. That's a Sherman Alexie quote. He
Uh,
said it a few times.
yeah, I think that, yeah, this pathological altruism is really bad for society. There are certain individuals, yeah, serial rapists, serial murderer, or something like that. I mean, they need to kind of be put away. And I do believe in humane conditions in jails where it's not, people being treated like animals. But yeah, you can't have this and many times these are people who have these ideas are really in safe neighborhoods. They're not really subject to violence and things like that very much. So they have this luxury to kind of, be very, very benevolent with even the worst kinds of behavior in society, and not have any consequences from that benevolence, but so-called benevolence. But
mhm,
yeah, I agree. Yeah, no matter what it comes from, I would say it maybe comes from the evolutionary psychology that I think there's something about that in the Cain and Abel story where sometimes murder. I think you and I both agree it does not really advantage someone deep down, but there is many times in life. I think maybe the Fortunatus story is like that, where in terms of worldly success, I mean, like the most horrible things do at least temporarily like benefit people sometimes. I mean, yeah. So I think maybe there is just some of that, just evolutionary psychology just kind of comes through, and it's just like, maybe I never they envision they never had the skills or just the industriousness to really become somewhat enlightened person. And it's like I can get to a lesser place like by doing some really bad stuff to people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple ways I can take that. Like one, to bring it back to Robin Hood, like Robin Hood kills this guy,
Yeah.
right in the beginning of the story. Like he murders him. Not exactly in cold blood, but he wasn't in danger of his life. The guy missed him. Everybody was kind of letting him get away, but he had to turn around and his pride had him turn around and kill that guy. And
Yeah.
like he's our hero. He's the guy we're looking up to here, but he has that moment. And I just think that's if something like that happens, then you have to take your licks,
Yeah, and he
whether that's
does.
going to prison or escaping the entire thing, which he does do. He goes and lives in the woods. He loses
Yeah.
his whole whatever his comfortable life, whether he's a yeoman or a noble. Like he's living in the woods.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he has to give up his whole life, including his love and his
Hmm.
chance for family. And he also is paying penance in a way. Like he's very joyful about it, but he is helping people. He's with alms like all the time. And maybe getting beat the hell up by Little John is a little bit of that too. I don't know. I mean, it
Yeah, yeah,
in this story at least, like he gets real, it's like goes on for an hour. Like he's getting pummeled. They're like he's hurt. So,
yeah,
and
yeah. And
that's
it ends
also
with
where
him
he like
getting like
cries.
clocked upside the head. And I think there's a
Yeah.
line in there about like his head feels like it's full of a swarming hive of June bees or something. So that does
Uh,
not sound like a fun place to be after you got your head whacked, you
yeah.
know? Yeah.
And yeah, as opposed to like a psychopath or something like that, supposedly how they are. Yeah, it kind of warmed my heart to see when he killed the guy, like he was in real mental distress after that. Like he was running away. I can't remember what phrase they used, but yeah, he was like he did not have his head about him. Like and this guy had been in 100% trying to murder him asshole, right? And
Hmm.
like you said, he's a figure of some authority and acting like that and older too. So
Hmm.
he in many ways he should know better. And then he tried to kill Robin Hood uh, after like reneging on a bet and everything after
Hmm.
that he had goaded Robin Hood into.
Right.
And still Robin Hood is like his heart is really hurting from like having killed this guy.
Yeah. In fact, I want to look that up because I feel like the wording there is actually maybe really
Yeah, I liked it
might be
too.
really interesting. The first part, let's see. The first part, um,
I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but after he ran through the greenwood after the murder, gone was all the joy and brightness from everything, for his heart was sick within him, and it borne in upon his soul that he had slain a man.
yeah, 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 yeah. And then, yeah, and immediately right after that, it says, alas, uh, I would that you had never said a word to me, or that I had passed without, or that my finger had fallen off, rather than this had
Yeah.
happened. In haste I smote, but grieve I sore at leisure. So, like in a moment of haste, he killed this man, but now his grief is long lasting. And then he says, "What's done is done. The egg is cracked and cannot be cured." And that's if you compare that to even the guy he just killed, right? The guy he just killed. Um, the wording is then all the foresters filled with rage. Oh no, wait, that's not it.
Yeah, that was after the murder, right?
Well, this is after he kills the deer. It's a little further up.
Uh,
I'm looking for the wording around how they describe the guy that tries to shoot him.
mm.
Let's see. Now, well, it would have been for him who had spoken first had he left Robin Hood alone.
Mm,
But his anger was hot, both because the youth had gotten the better of him and because of the deep draughts of ale that he had been quaffing,
mm,
quaffing, drinking.
mhm,
Um, so of a sudden, without any warning, he sprang to his feet, seized upon a bow, and fitted it to a shaft. "Aye," cried he, "and I'll hurry thee anon." And he sent an arrow whistling after Robin. So there you have somebody who has this moment of major discomfort at being sort of outdone by this youth, and
mm,
he is angry and he is drunk and he acts in haste and can't deal with those emotions. And then
mm,
with Robin Hood, like his emotion that he's dealing with is grief and despair, but he's able to put it aside and say, okay, this is what it is now. This is what I'm experiencing. I'm gonna have to pay the consequences, and that's when he goes off to the woods. That's when he sort of exiles himself. And I think that that shows sort of the better way to handle any kind of negative emotion is to say, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. What do I do next? Instead of like, no, I'm not going to deal with this. It's your fault. I'm going to kill you because you made me angry.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. The Forester had not dealt with his emotions well at all. And partially because he's drinking, he tries to make fun of this guy too much. He's eating, he's in front of his friends. I mean, this is such a like a story where many tragic young men stories of your buddies are there. You're sort of like already set up in a situation where you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing, presumably, because he doesn't tell him not to kill the deer. He has one duty right there. He doesn't do it. He instead is in this personal thing with this other guy, and he's drinking and they're eating. I don't know if it matters that they're eating with their hands. It just makes them seem a little more uncivilized or something like that. But maybe that was common at that time or something. But yeah, the whole situation is set up to be a tragedy, and
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is what illegitimate rule does. It creates tragedies
right,
because
yeah,
it doesn't have that moral. There's not that moral leadership because when there's that moral leadership, I've heard it said somewhere that like roughly like I don't know 60 to 80% of people will just kind of go along with whatever the prevailing social structure is and a smaller percentage will try and be good and a smaller percentage will just be assholes no matter what the prevailing structure is. But when you've got an illegitimate structure, a lot of people are like, "Oh, okay, well I can just be illegitimate.
yeah,
I can just do whatever I want because look, they're doing it. So
yeah,
it must be okay
yeah.
for me to do it."
I think
Whereas
that's right. Yeah,
when you have the moral, then the people are like, oh, we're supposed to, okay. And they just kind of like, they're very like on some, on subconscious level, they're very much just like, yeah, whatever.
they're imitating. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
whatever it is
humans
we're
do.
doing, that's what we're doing. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, to ape is human.
Yeah.
I mean, we're imitating. I think we can imitate like a good religious figure or a good political figure. I think that's part of the reason we have religions is this structure built up to like Buddha's like pretty good, Jesus pretty good, like, kind of try to
Yeah.
be like them a little bit. Like, if you don't know what to do, like try to be like them a little bit.
Mhm.
And yeah, the foresters are, yeah, they're not really being necessarily supervised very well. Whoever, whatever they're supposed to be doing, presumably it's not drinking in the middle of the day and like insulting passerbys and you know, uh goading people into killing the very thing over which they have responsibility. There's some kind of a lack of leadership there.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole social contract breaks down because, like, in an ideal world, you would have these guys who were there to enforce the rules and they would say, hey, we're enforcing the rules. Everybody just here's what you got to do. Don't do this, do this. And people would be like, oh, okay, great. Like you have our best intent in mind, and so does the leadership, because we've seen through their actions that they're moral, and we've seen through your actions that you're abiding by their decrees. And so we can relax and be ourselves. And as long as we stay within these social lines, that can all work out. And that's, like I said, that's ideal. Like no society ever reaches that peak, but there's a gradient between that and complete despotism and most societies fall somewhere in the middle. So we're talking a direction rather than a goal.
Mm.
But still, I mean, you know, we've had that. Societies have had that where things feel relatively safe and things are okay and we're all fairly relaxed. Um, it's arguable whether it's possible to do that entirely. I mean, you have like Freud's ideas of civilization is built upon the suppression of certain things. So there's always going to be some kind of angst or struggle at the base of it. Um, I'm not sure that I believe that, but it's true enough that we do have to take it into account.
Yeah,
You
I'd
know,
agree with
it's
that.
that or
Yeah.
something like that, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say that's probably, and this is probably my Rousseau influence. It's probably more, there's probably more suppression of sort of of psychological things in cities, and I think especially mega cities. I don't know if this has to do with your experience. I know at some point you left New York City because it wasn't so good for you, right? So
mhm.
I just think of, the situation of Robin Hood, that I think on a larger level there's something about the healing of society, of going into nature and living in nature, and something about like mega cities with just almost no nature, where like the exception is like going into where you travel maybe a few miles through concrete and glass and steel to get to like a park. And Central Park is really, really nice, and it does kind of, when you go into it, right, it kind of does feel like a little forest in some places and stuff. It's really nice, but um, yeah, the nature is the exception, right? And
Yeah,
there's some trees and everything, and but yeah, I wonder
yeah.
if that just has like an effect. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it definitely did for me. And I can say, like, doesn't matter where you are in Central Park, like, you see buildings. Like, you're never,
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
yeah, there's never this sense of, I mean, you know, they might be like peeking up over the side, or maybe if you're like right under a couple of trees, you're like, oh, I can't see it. But like, it's always very ringed by it. And it's a very different thing to say, like, oh, I drove like 3 hours out of town and I was in the middle of a woods where like, I didn't hear an airplane for 3 hours, or I didn't, you
Yeah.
know, it's just like, and you can feel when you're in that kind of space. Well, I'll just speak from my own experience. When I'm in that kind of space, I can feel kind of how far out the nature goes. Like there's
Yeah.
this, when you're in a little park, you're like, oh, this is nice, but like I can feel these houses over there and over there. And when you're out in the woods, there's this sense of this sort of, you can just feel how there's no walls anywhere. It just kind of continues and continues and continues. And
Yeah.
yet it's all alive together. Whereas when you have houses, everything's very like, we're alive here and they're alive here and so on and so forth. And so to my mind, going back to nature, or in my experience, going back to nature is a reminder of how everything is interconnected.
Right.
And if you can have that if you're going to have that in a city where there isn't that symbolic reminder of the forest, of the interplay of all the beings of, you know, the trees and the animals and the mushrooms and everything else, like you can just see it there, how everything exists together, then a good society is a mirroring of that. It's people being able to exist together in a city because there's enough open-heartedness, there's enough trust in the system that we can at least ape, kind of monkey, mimic that sort of natural flow, or do the best to bring that natural being togetherness into our society. And that's what a healthy society is. And when the rulership loses their legitimacy, when they stop caring for that healthy flow, then society starts to crumble and people need to go back to the greenwood to rediscover what it means to be human and alive.
Yeah, that sounds right to me. I would think, yeah, the bigger the city, the harder it is to have some, something that brings you back to at least human nature and, social trust and everything. It's just, if there's just too many people, it's like you can't, there's probably some switch in your brain that goes, I can't quite have that level of bonhomie, that social trust and everything with this many people. Maybe you could live in some sort of enclave or community, and like if you've grown up there and there's like some commonality between everybody, then you can. I was curious. I remember going to Bangkok, and It seemed like even in the middle of the busiest part of the city, there's like little shrines everywhere, like on every street corner, just out on the street and everything. Sorry, like like part of somebody's property, but it's out on, you can see it from the sidewalk and everything. I guess you can pray there or whatever. I
Hmm.
mean, do you think maybe part of the problem in our societies in the West is we're so secular that even our architecture is like with sort of modern architecture, postmodern architecture. It's all about this vision of the architect, and it's sort of in general, it's not very much about beauty, I think, and about uh, continuity with the other buildings or things like that. But anyway, do you think there's other things besides the number of people and just the lack of nature in modern uh, uh, large cities in the West, like lack of religion or certain kind of architecture, aesthetics that can contribute to alienation and
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so much so much comes up in that. For sure, I think the architecture that I see going up nowadays does feel lacking in beauty, does feel lacking in um, the idea that the people who are going to live inside of it and pass by it
yeah,
have souls that appreciate
yeah,
anything other than utilitarianism. I think that speaks to that's another way of showing the illegitimacy of the social structure.
mm,
Not to say exactly that it's the like, oh, if we just had a different president, the architecture would change.
yeah, yeah,
But if we had a society where people remembered beauty and
yeah,
remembered like were able to appreciate that, and maybe that could come from, the president or from the government or whatever, like there could be initiatives to increase awareness, free days at museums or something, kind of get that
mm,
spirit back into the people. I don't know.
yeah, yeah,
But so it can kind of trickle down in that way. But I think the architecture is a symbol of a decaying culture because it lacks that. Um, but I also wanted to talk about what you said about Bangkok, that did you find the presence of the shrines to be a question of either beauty or connectedness, or like I imagine it brought something that's lacking from Midtown Manhattan,
yeah,
and I'm just wondering like how you would word that.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't I don't have any deep opinions, but I mean, first of all, it's not pointing to something utilitarian. It's not about
Hmm.
selling something or having that space to store stuff to sell or, or nothing or like an aesthetic thing that might sort of be like bragging for the owner.
Hmm.
Um and yeah, it's pointing to a long tradition of people. There's monks that don't have many worldly possessions who dedicate themselves, and other clergy and followers who dedicate themselves. Even if I didn't know anything about Buddhism, they seem to be dedicating themselves to something other than, yeah, utilitarian things than the worldly, acquiring things, including reputation or status. They seem to be about something else somehow, and they're this guy from 2,500 years ago, Buddha, seems to not exactly be about, you know, just owning a bunch of stuff and trying to get power in the world. I kind of think yeah. So yeah, I just feel like it's hard to mistake it for something, yeah, utilitarian or ugly.
That's really great. Like the pointer of it, the shrines being something that tells the culture that there's more to life than utilitarianism, than getting and spending. And what I see there is like when a culture remembers that there's a higher power, or if you don't like the God language, that there is something beyond just social structure that is higher and that maintains
Yeah.
continuity,
Yeah.
then what you have is you have this line of the eternal or of something close to the eternal
Hmm.
that's there, and then you have the social structure underneath that. And not, so
Mm.
that there's an implication built into there that the social structures may rise and fall. They may grow and
Oh
decay
yeah.
and they may grow, but there's this other thing. So you have
And
this placeholder for eternity, and the social structure doesn't have to hold eternity.
yeah, yeah, I think
And
that's right.
and when you have a social structure that needs to hold eternity and it can't, it has to double down and it has to double down. And that's exactly what he talks about in that Trickster podcast, that when a society gets locked up like that and cannot die, something will come and kill it. Which is, again, everything has bellies, everything eats. There's this idea of like, I feed so I can feed other people. I eat, I am supported by the planet so that when I die, I can feed something, or so that in my life I can create. I'm given energy so I can create energy, you know. And part of that is dying, part of that is giving, part of that is losing, and when you have a social structure that's able to be born and die and born and die, and people still have that spiritual eternity, yeah, whatever, that spiritual level
Hmm.
of the
Yeah.
eternal that they can look to, then they aren't so tight around the social structures.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
And like an extreme example of this is, you were saying like, oh, like in New York, it's hard to have that bone homie, that friendly kind of a, larger city that just like kind of easy. The time that I most felt that in New York was right after 9/11.
Yeah.
Like everybody cared about everybody else.
Wow.
Everybody was like,
Jesus.
how you doing? Like just all the walls were down and everybody was more themselves
God.
because the social structure had died.
Yeah.
And it was a tragedy. And I'm not saying we need to have 9/11s every 11 years or whatever, but that's an example of when you don't have that eternal through line and the society needs to be, and it becomes tight, it becomes constrictive. Anything that can get air, that can get that to loosen and get air in there helps return people back to that level of friendliness and of, okay, like, who knows, this doesn't have to be this way all the time. I can be more myself. There's a little more room for play. It doesn't have to be locked down in order to be perfect. It's not utopian. It can fail and we're still okay, whether that's because we're forced to see it fail in front of us and then realize, wow, we're still okay. Wow, okay. Or it's like, oh, this can happen because this is the festival of Saturnalia where we turn everything upside down and the social structure completely falls apart and I can be whoever I want to be. And then, tomorrow we're going to go through it. We're going to come back to it. But for tonight or the next week or whatever, we get to have this crazy party. Um, yeah, and that just brings to mind that, just real quick, I try not to talk too much, but I get so excited by how all these things connect. Like the Purge movies are like, they're feeding that. They're an attempt to feed that need, but they're not actually, they're actually suppressing it because we get to act it out in the movies and have those feelings in the movies, but nothing changes. So it's the social structure trying to reinforce itself while suppressing the destructive issues by giving us stories that help us just like run through those emotions so the social structure can keep going on. But I think as we see, that's that's not going to happen. Or worst case, like something, there's a lot of talk about the collapse of Western civilization, and I think that's what people are actually sensing, is this need for a death and a rebirth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we don't do it, it's going to happen to us.
Yeah, and I think death, and that's something about the eternal, that it reminds us that we will die. And I thought that's probably a lot of where a lot of the energy of 9/11 comes from. We're not so worried about the meetings, the money, the bills, and all that stuff, and the social kind of BS. The way that we get along with each other is, yeah, oh God, I can die, I will die. These humans around me matter a lot more, and they're like me, and we're all together.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the how you know what the Blitz is in London? Like something
Hmm.
like 40 days straight. 40 nights straight, the Germans bombed them like every single day. And there were other days, but like there was a specific period of something like 40 days where they bombed them every single day. Like this
Wow.
massive planes coming over, bombing your city and just people dying and everything. But they found out that so one interesting thing that I remember is that the incidence of mental illness went way down during that time, even severe mental illness like schizophrenia and stuff like that, that we think of
Wow.
as totally organic,
Hmm.
went way, way, way down, like almost non-existent or something like that.
Wow.
But another thing is that they did studies decades later and they found that people had this like strong nostalgia for that time
Really?
because of how much people were
Wow.
together. It's like the togetherness like overshadowed almost in their minds all the death. I mean, at least it was strong
Yeah.
enough for them to have nostalgia. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can feel that. Like,
yeah.
I have nostalgia for the days after 9/11, but I don't want 9/11 to happen again. But I remember how warm everybody felt and how much we all seemed to care about each other. And yeah, no, I think you're right that there's something about having a catastrophe that needs all of our attention that then our attention gets focused on that and it stops feeding all of these little things that drive us, these neuroses that drive us crazy all the time. That's really interesting about the like the schizophrenia and the other mental stuff. Like the thing that comes to mind for me there is Malidoma, the shaman I used to kind of work with. There's an article of him going into I think he wrote it. I'd have to try and find it, but I remember hearing about him going into a mental institution and realizing that like all the people in the mental institution, I mean, all is a, you know, that's a little black
Mhm.
and white,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like
yeah.
all the people in the mental institution were, he was like, oh, these are all healers. These are all the people that came to bring medicine to the society, and the society has no way to welcome them or initiate them into their gifts. And so they just go crazy because they have all of these uh, urges or these voices, or they have these abilities to like, the thing I was thinking was like, during the Blitz, everybody is so focused on surviving and on being together and supporting each other that if you are a person who is aware of and holding the resentments and the anger that everybody feels, and all of a sudden all the resentment and the anger goes away because everybody's focused on this staying alive and holding the community, it'd be like a breath of fresh air if you are on some level tuned into, you know, the people around you, which is what traditional culture would be a healer, somebody who's able to kind of feel that what the whole group needs, is able to speak the truth of the group, is able to run them through rituals or offer them, you know, ways of healing on that other level. You have to be aware of that other level. And a war or a tragedy can very much clean that up, maybe. I don't know. That's brand new territory for me. I'd never thought about it until you mentioned the thing about the Blitz, but I could see there, not that that's easy to test, but I could see there being something to that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I've never thought of that possibility. I have heard the argument that yes, there is some there is a lot of commonality between schizophrenics and shamans in traditional cultures. I do think there's something to that. I also think there's just like organic mental illness and that our brains are formed mysteriously and there's just a lot of mistakes that happen and it's just things are not just if someone's educated right and in a good society, it doesn't mean every single person is still going to be like a healthy, good individual. I still think there's just going to be some problems, some chaos, even at the
Mhm.
molecular level. Maybe that's happening, but I do think there's something to that.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
would say a healthy society is one where when that happens, they're able to absorb it and integrate it. You know, they're able to
yeah,
either help the person because it's a small enough group, everybody can help them out through the rough time, or there's the lineage of tradition that can initiate them to a level where they're able to be useful, or if they really are
mm,
just, you know, mentally handicapped to the point of not being functional. Like there's a good story. I think it was Mary Leakey was asked. Like one of the early anthropologists was asked like what she thought the first sign of civilization was in the archaeological record, and she said it wasn't like pottery, it wasn't a house, it wasn't any of that. It was the sign. It was the fossil of a human leg bone that had broken and been reset because
Yeah.
it showed. I mean, but for the
Mm.
podcast, it shows that they were able to care for someone.
Yeah,
They
I
were able to
agree.
take care of them, and they're strong enough to integrate that wound without having to cast the person out.
Yeah. Yeah, that person presumably would not only not be useful for a time, but would be detrimental to the immediate survival of the group. Although also that person would presumably be helpful in the future. So it might be like, a broader look at self-interest. But
Mhm.
already that does separate us from animals, presumably who maybe aren't seeing things in that long-term scale.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I agree with you that yeah, a healthier society does try to integrate people as much as we can, and not only the mentally ill, and there's societies where they do kind of there is more community mental health where people that they're more integrated in the society and everything. They're not so cast out into mental hospitals where 99% of people never ever have any contact with them. And I would
yeah,
say maybe even more so is the same case with old people, with where like in many societies and maybe almost all societies, civilized societies included, the old people live with us until they die. You take care of the young kids, and then you people are try to be useful to society if they can be, and those who can't be are taken care of in some way. And then yeah, when you can't any longer be useful physically, then you're taken care of by people. And of course, you could talk about how they are carrying the wisdom of some previous generations, and they are still useful spiritually. And it says
yeah,
something even more when maybe people aren't taking care of the people who are useful to them for spiritually and for memory. And again, it
yeah,
gets back to maybe the focus on the utilitarian, just the objects that are in front of me that I'm trying to acquire more objects or build up my self image in some way.
yeah. I think something about that too, like the the sort of lack of respect for elders in our culture is like a couple elements. Is one, if you look at human history, for like 99% of it, it was a question of we're in a place, we're in a world, we've got our culture, we've got our village or our, conglomeration of villages, and we know how to survive, but like paper, stone tablets, like those are relatively new inventions, even that, let alone, printing press and computers and all of that. So if you didn't know what to do, if you run into a problem and you don't know how to deal with it, you have to have somebody to ask. And the people who are older, like they may remember when they were your age. Oh, yeah, back in the day, there was this weird drought of the river, but it ended up working out okay, and we just had to like do it, survive for a few months. And this happened long ago, but let me tell you these tales. Like that's all people had. There was no internet to look that up. And so the natural value of experience and of old age was much clearer, and change was a lot slower.
Yeah.
So, you like I'm not gonna ask, well, my grandparents are passed, but like I'm not gonna ask my grandparents like, oh, my computer's messed up. Grandma, how did you deal with computers in your day? I don't know how these things work, like, and rightfully so, but our world is changing so fast that their
Yeah.
experience is not as relevant to the problems we're dealing with. So we forget that we still, we forget that that experience has value because we value utilitarian things so much that they can't help us with because they're the things they used utilitarianly are so old fashioned that the wisdom doesn't apply to the things that we're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I once heard Mark Andreessen talk about the argument from Plato. I think it's in the Phaedrus. It's kind of funny because Plato is maybe the most famous author or one of the most famous authors in Western history, but he made like a strong argument against writing.
Really? I didn't know that. That's funny.
Yeah, it's I can't it's something like, basically it makes you lazy. It makes you mentally weak because otherwise you have to develop your memory and there's a shared function of education. Plato was very big on that. He almost only I think he only wrote dialogues. Like I think earlier in his life before he met Socrates, there's lore about him wanting to become a playwright and having written plays. But then I might have told you this before, but once he met Socrates and had some epic conversation with him, he burned all his youthful plays and totally changed his life, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah, he
Right.
only wrote dialogue. So yeah, there is this kind of idea of education being from teacher to student, and student can always ask questions and get clarification and not spend hours with a written thing and get totally off track and waste time and yeah, and not be developing himself and everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's like I can see, when writing was a little more of a complicated thing, on papyrus or whatever, and you can do it all by hand, like it would be the equivalent nowadays of like when we talk about people who are just stuck in their heads. Like they're just they just live up here. They only think like they don't have that sort of any feedback loops coming from their body. Um, they're not in tune with how their body they're not in tune with how their body is in tune with the world around them and the relationships that they're in and all that stuff. Like the data's there, but they can't access it. And it's like what I at least what I hear from your description, what I hear Plato warning against is the exact same thing that I think a lot of us in our society are dealing with nowadays. I mean, I know from my own in my own experience, it was something that I discovered through my meditation practice was how to come into the body. There were some specific teachings I got about that really shifted. I was already sitting meditation, and then I got these sort of body-based teachings, and my sitting practice was entirely different. And then here 15 years later, now my life is very different. Just what I was able to develop out of tuning into those feedback loops, just internally, let alone not even speaking of it as a social structure, just as a body, as a single entity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think being in touch with the body is very important. And God, I forgot what I was going to say. Is something about yeah, that with education. But oh, I just wanted to mention there's something from Vervaeke. I might have mentioned it to you before, but Lectio Divina, or he asserts that one of the changes that's led to our current meaning crisis is the change in reading, where reading used to be this communal thing. It
Hmm.
used to be, you would read with others, and it was kind of there was a poetry to it. There's an embodiment, a community. And in the last maybe several hundred years, with the more adoption of Aristotle, I'm not sure about I can't remember the details, but basically, reading much more became something that you did individually to try to figure out the information content of arguments and whether they're true or not, whether you believe them or not. It went from being this expanded thing that was done with others. People in Lectio Divina talk about how there's this sense of the divine living in the text, and
Hmm.
that is not the way we read now.
No.
Right?
Yeah. 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 Huh.
I
That is
remember.
interesting. Yeah,
mm,
go ahead. No, I don't have anything to say.
I remember a scholar friend of mine talking about how there's this reference to presumably around that time of someone making a note of how odd it was seeing this person reading by themselves.
Hmm.
So reading was almost always done like reading aloud, feeling the words, hearing the words with your body, with other people, people presumably commenting and everything.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because that's so like prior to being a written culture, you're an oral culture, right? And
Yeah.
so the oral culture is just like it is just speaking in the group and hearing, and then the book kind of holds the place of the speaker, which is, I imagine, very necessary when paper is hard to come by and you have to make every book yourself. You have to,
Mm,
if you want to copy, you have to copy it word for word and make
mm,
sure it's legible. So,
mm,
like manuscripts or written content becomes much more valuable.
mm.
Whereas, in our day with the printing presses, it's very
Yeah.
you can have a copy of the book. I can have a copy of the book. No big deal. There's no
Yeah.
need to have the one copy read out loud to the group because it's so rare. But
Yeah.
it does distance us even further from that interconnected oral storytelling. And I know like one of the things that I think is really important in the coaching work that I do is it's you can think about your own problem all day long and never get anywhere uh, with it because but you can work with somebody and like have something change because it engages different parts of the brain when when some part of us knows there's another person
Yeah.
in your experience, different parts of the brain lights that light up, and so you're able to access different parts of yourself in your life than you can on your own. I think journaling kind of does a similar thing because it externalizes it to a certain degree, so you
Hmm.
have a little bit more objectivity, but
Hmm.
but you're still not really clicking into that like the other person is present with me in this moment. You might be writing with the perspective of, oh, somebody might read this one day, and so you're sort of thinking about community, but it's still not the same. And there's something special. I mean, dialogos, two people, there's something special that comes through that you just can't get on your own.
I
And I think
agree.
the oral storytelling, like lectio divino, like that's the same thing. You're
Yeah.
engaging that social reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I hope our culture can, I mean, technology is just going to increase. I just hope we can find some way, maybe through some religion, that, it is decreed that you have to do communal reading or something, like, to get
Mhm.
every twice a week or something. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I hope there's some kind of structure that it becomes commonplace, and that, and I think that would probably help. Kids have been getting worse at reading, and I think that
Mhm.
would help kids reading too, because I sort of think like handing them a book and a list of questions is not the way to teach, and ordering them to go up to their room and read is not the way to learn to read. It's for the family to read together, even separately, sometimes their own books, and also together, and it becomes a part of the culture. And
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like my friends have a little 2-year-old. There's a lot of my friends are starting to have kids. So I'm around a fair number of like little kids, and you read them a story. You sit with them and you read them a story, and you finish
yeah,
the story, and they say again, again. Like
yeah,
they derive so much joy out of sharing that imaginal space with you
yeah,
that maybe eventually they learn to read on their own. But when I'm reading a book on my own, it's very rare that I'm like, oh, let's do that again. It's like,
yeah,
no, I just finished that. I'll read something else. It doesn't
yeah,
have that excitement and that joy of a newly discovered thing shared with another person.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's neat.
Okay. Well, yeah, pretty good podcast. Maybe in the future we'll kind of take up this idea of, I don't know, communal reading or communal stuff. I just, that really kind of seems special to me, and I'd like to kind of try to increase that in the world in some way and explore that maybe here.
Yeah, yeah. I think I was going to say something about that. Um, because you were saying about like how to cultivate that in society, and I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
think they're like social change happens when things are very bad and somebody presents a way that makes them better that people can notice. And then that will spread. That will spread quite
Mm,
quickly.
mm,
Um,
mm.
because you have to have that shift. Kind of like 9/11, like you have that shift. Like you have to notice the difference between how closed off everybody was. A change happens. This thing makes us feel, oh, much more alive this somehow feels more right. This somehow feels more like how society is supposed to be. Oh, we really like this. Hey, everybody, this thing works. You should try it.
Mm,
I think that would be the direction I would, if if somebody asked me, that I would think to go in, as far as like how to create that change is develop a system that reliably produces results for people well enough that they can take it and run with it on their own, and then that will spread until it serves the need, and or until it becomes so codified in itself that then
mm.
it loses the sort of life force that it would have. But
Yeah, I look forward to that kind of thing, and I think this culture seems ripe for it. Mm,
yeah, I agree. I'm really interested to see what we manage to bring forth.
yeah, yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds great.
yeah. All right. Sounds like a
Okay,
podcast.
talk to you soon. Yeah.
Yeah.